ISIS again celebrates murder online, using it as inspiration. Security experts approach consensus that Russia was behind the DNC hack. WikiLeaks' Assange says he released the DNC files when he did to damage nominee Clinton. Key sniffer inhales strokes on Wi-Fi keyboards. Smart light bulbs shown to render IoT networks vulnerable. Ransomware and DDoS trends. A new U.S. policy outlines agency responsibilities during cyber incidents. And Pokemon Go may get you to go places you shouldn't. Time to tell you about our sponsor, Cylance. Are you looking for something beyond legacy security approaches? If you are, and who isn't, you're probably interested in something that protects you at machine speed and that recognizes malware for what it is, no matter how the bad guys have tweaked the binaries or cloaked their malice in the appearance of innocence. Cylance knows malware by its DNA. Their solution scales easily, and it protects your network with minimal updates, less burden on your system resources, and limited impact on your network and your users. Find out how Cylance is revolutionizing security with artificial intelligence and machine learning. It may be artificial intelligence, but it's real protection. Visit Cylance.com to learn more about the next generation of anti-malware. And even better, if you're at Black Hat this year, do swing by booth 1124 and chat with the Cylance people. Cylance, artificial intelligence, real threat prevention. And we thank Cylance for sponsoring our show. I'm Dave Bittner in Baltimore with your CyberWire summary for Wednesday, July 27, 2016. ISIS claims credit online for the horrific attack in a church just outside of Rouen, France. The caliphate's haste to associate itself with the murder suggests the sort of content the terrorist organization finds effective in information operations. The killers themselves spoke and acted in ways consistent with ISIS inspiration. A study finds evidence that such inspiration continues to reach a large enough audience to be worrisome. Some are ideologically committed. Others appear to be simply disturbed individuals vulnerable to what the New York Times' stable of academic experts is calling contagion. Most security experts have reached consensus that the DNC hack was a Russian job, and in all likelihood a Russian government job, albeit in a deniable way. Evidence remains necessarily circumstantial, but a great deal has accumulated. Why the Russian government would be interested in hacking the DNC remains an open question. Some see the DNC hacks as part of President Putin's long game to discredit post-Cold War international democracy and dismantle its sustaining institutions like NATO and the EU. Why WikiLeaks released the hacked documents is no mystery at all. Julian Assange says he timed the release to damage U.S. Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton, whom he views as an inveterate opponent and the author of many of Assange's troubles. StealthBits Technologies' Brad Boosie sees encryption as the basic defensive tool enterprises ought to use. Quote, "The technology to encrypt emails is well known but not commonly implemented. The main reason for this is complexity and infrastructure cost. Most weight the value of the information that is transmitted against what it would cost to protect it. If the protection cost outweighs the value of the information, then most do nothing and let operations continue as normal." End quote. He suggests that enterprises might wish to take a hard look at such cost-benefit calculations. Last line's John Marshall reminded us of some of the other reasons enterprises decline to encrypt. Quote, "The use of web-based email that requires two-factor authentication does help in terms of encrypting access, but the usability and functional differences these have to corporate mail systems will lead users to prefer to use those, which typically rules encryption out." End quote. The Democrats are holding their national convention this week in Philadelphia, and last week the Republicans held their convention in Cleveland. Keeping that convention safe, both physically and from cyber attacks, was the responsibility of the Cleveland Host Committee, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. On the cybersecurity front, one of the organizations they brought in to protect the convention was Dark Cubed. Vince Chrysler is CEO at Dark Cubed, and he told us about the preparations during the run-up to the convention.
At the end of the day, the real force of the effort is only a couple weeks long at most. So from our perspective, our product, we installed it early because we wanted to start getting a baseline of what does traffic look like on that network so we can start understanding good versus bad and start to triage and understand, is the level of attack changing as we get closer to the convention or not. So we deployed about 8 or 9 months early and started providing security for that network late last year. And then as we came closer to the convention, resources start spinning up, and you start looking at how exposed is this network? What are the exposed ports from the outside? What are the architecture and configuration of that network from the inside? And then you come up with a game plan. And that's what was really exciting to me about the team that we worked with for the convention. Is it wasn't a huge team, but it was a team of people that had great experience and capability. And so it's applying those creative tactics to securing that network.
There's that old saying that the best defense is a good offense. Chrysler and his team used that strategy in Cleveland.
My fundamental philosophy in cybersecurity is offense always wins, defense always loses no matter what. So if somebody wants to hack a network and they have enough time, money, and commitment, they will be successful. And so what that informs then is a different approach to cybersecurity. It's broken out into a couple different pieces. One is, how do I protect my network as best as possible given the resources I have? 2 is, how do I find out sooner rather than later that something has happened? And 3 is, how do I respond as quickly as possible to minimize the damage once something does happen? And so when we came at the security infrastructure for the convention, it was really coming at it with, okay, we've done our work on some of the basics in terms of how do you minimize the exposure of the network. So minimizing the number of connections, minimizing the number of open ports, having good awareness of all the devices that are on the network. But then it's really focused on how do you discover that something strange is happening within those networks. And that's where you start to see interesting things. Because we were very proactive in terms of segmenting that network out. So you're segmenting out the official users from the guest users, from the other infrastructure. You're able to watch activity in each of those segments independently. And so we certainly saw on the guest wireless, as machines would come in and start instantly pinging out to botnets or malware command and control servers, those would spike in our systems. I remember one morning, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday morning, that a machine connected to the guest Wi-Fi, and within 2 hours it had done thousands of requests out to a foreign IP address. But we saw that there was UDP traffic traveling overseas, and we were able to block that traffic. But we were able to continue to see it ping, and it pinged for about 5.5 hours until finally giving up. And again, there were certainly lots of other malware, botnet sorts of activity. There's lots of external scanning from all the common actors that you would expect to see. But we were watching that in real time and blocking those as they came in.
That's Vince Chrysler. He's the CEO at Dark Cubed. 2 recently discovered vulnerabilities are worth noting, and they also involve encryption issues. In the first, Bastille Networks describes Key Sniffer, a vulnerability in low-cost Wi-Fi keyboards that don't encrypt keystrokes before sending them to the Wi-Fi dongle. Bluetooth devices aren't affected. An attacker could intercept those keystrokes from distances of more than 100 meters. In the second, Rapid7 has reported 9 vulnerabilities in Osram's Lightify smart light bulbs, the most serious of which could permit attackers to capture authentication handshakes. Osram has patched 4 of the 9 bugs. So businesses, you may not be that interested in your light bulbs, but those light bulbs may be interested in you. Insignia Security reports finding UK telco O2 customers' credentials for sale on the dark net. The credential stuffing problem originates in password reuse. We heard from Tripwire's Travis Smith, who pointed out that, quote, password reuse can cripple even the most secure systems. Using authentic credentials rather than attempting to leverage exploits is less risky for the attacker, as security tools are more likely to detect an active exploit. Since passwords are commonly reused across websites, stolen credentials from one breach are often used across other sites, end quote. Many observers of this breach recommend using a password manager. A good idea, to be sure, although such products aren't a panacea either. Google's Project Zero Day has found a hole in password manager LastPass. Ransomware and denial-of-service attacks continue to be the leading forms of cybercrime affecting businesses and individuals. F-Secure is being quoted as saying a ransomware gang has admitted its connection to an unnamed Fortune 500 company that allegedly hired the crew to disrupt competitors. Mike Patterson, CEO of Plixer, commented on this to the CyberWire, saying, quote, I wouldn't be surprised if we hear about big companies launching ransomware attacks. The attacks, however, don't mean they were approved by executive management. The best defense right now is to educate employees to be careful when clicking, end quote. Locky and Cryptex, of course, remain among the leading strains of ransomware circulating in the wild. Healthcare organizations continue to be preferred but not exclusive targets. DDoS is also on the rise, with targets in Russia prominently affected. DDoS can be conducted with straightforwardly criminal motives, but it's also a common hacktivist tactic. Terbium Labs researchers are watching an actor calling himself, herself, or themselves the Israeli Falcon, who's involved in DDoS attacks against various Palestinian targets. The nominal motive is retaliation for Anonymous's Op Israel, although the Falcon also uses a Guy Fawkes mask, as anyone could. In the U.S., President Obama yesterday issued PPD-41, Cyber Incident Coordination, establishing a much-commented-on color system for the severity of cyber incidents. Many industry observers wonder where the last few years' high-profile attacks would fall on the scale. The policy also fixes roles and missions for cyber attack response. The FBI leads threat response, DHS leads asset response, and the ODNI leads intelligence, blocking, and tackling. Finally, unscrupulous Pokemon Go players have cooked up geospoofing bots that enable them to cheat. We're shocked that there's cheating going on in an online game, and Pokemon have turned up inside another denied area, the hot zone of Japan's breached and broken Fukushima nuclear reactor. A tip, if you're in Japan, don't go into Fukushima, even for a Magmar, Venusaur, or Gardevoir. Okay, well, of Gardevoir, but wear your full protective gear, kids, or maybe a geospoofing bot. And then, trainers, as you look back, you can say, we'll always have Fukushima. Time to take a moment and tell you about our sponsor, NetSparker. Are your security teams dealing with hundreds of vulnerability scan results? NetSparker not only automates scanning, but it verifies the exploits it finds, too. Reduce alert fatigue and improve security with NetSparker. Not only will your protection improve, but your costs will drop, and that's a good deal in anybody's book. NetSparker's automated approach to web application scanning lets your security team concentrate on the things best left to the human beings. Find out more about NetSparker Desktop and NetSparker Cloud. Whether you're pen testing or securing your enterprise online, you'll find what you need at netsparker.com. You can try it out for free with no strings attached. Go to netsparker.com/cyberwire for a 30-day fully functional version of NetSparker Desktop. And by fully functional, NetSparker means yes, really fully functional. Scan those websites with no obligation. Check it out at netsparker.com/cyberwire, and we thank NetSparker for sponsoring the CyberWire. And I'm joined once again by Dale Drew. He's the Chief Security Officer at Level 3 Communications. Dale, you mentioned that you've been seeing an uptick in DDoS attacks lately.
You know, we really have. Not only have we been seeing an uptick in DDoS attacks from a volumetric perspective, our average DDoS attack is between 10 to 15 gigs, and we've been seeing that increase quite exponentially. We've been seeing DDoS attacks in the 75 to 100 gig range, a little bit more common here lately. We're also seeing an increase in application attack DDoSes, where bad guys are getting much more creative and much more direct in being able to pretend to be millions of legitimate users gaining access to an application and consuming the resources of that application, which makes it very difficult to stop a DDoS attack. And then we're also seeing a very large uptick in what we believe to be fake DDoS ransomware hoaxes. We've seen a number of ransomware attempts going out to customers that appear to represent well-known DDoS hacking groups like the Armada Collective and the Lizard Squad, but they're not the same sort of MO. They're using much different sort of tactics and getting ransomware for them. So we believe that people are pretending to be these collectives to make a quick buck.
Dale Drew, thanks for joining us. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, along with interviews, our glossary, and more, visit thecyberwire.com. Thanks to all of our sponsors who make the CyberWire possible. The CyberWire podcast is produced by Pratt Street Media. Our editor is John Petrick, our social media editor is Jennifer Iben, and our technical editor is Chris Russell. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.